Hey friends, this is day 453 of Russian war against Ukraine. As you know, that in my videos, I always talk about everything that's happening in and around the war in the geopolitical space from the perspective of Ukraine, which I think in this case is the correct perspective. The last couple of weeks have been action-packed. A lot of things happened. So we have four main things to talk about. Number one, we're going to talk about Belgorod, which is a Russian town on the border of Ukraine and what's happening there. We're going to talk about Bakhmut, which has been the focal point of the war in the last 8 months, and has it finally fallen into the Russian hands. Number three, we're going to talk about the F-16 fighters, which have finally been approved for Ukraine. And finally, we're going to talk about the counteroffensive of Ukraine and what's happening with that, at which stage that is. So number one, in the last 24 hours, there have been battalions that have been taking little towns. So far, three little towns in the Belgorod Oblast, which is, let's say, Belgorod region. And Belgorod is a Russian town about 20 kilometers, 12, 13 miles from Kharkiv, which is a major Ukrainian city. So it's right on the border of Russia and Ukraine. And these battalions have been taking offensive actions. They've been advancing forward. They have taken a police station and sort of have established a presence in three little villages towards Belgorod, to the point where the governor of that region had announced the evacuation of the entire town of Belgorod. And he says, look, if you have a car, leave by car. If not, we're going to organize a bus for you. So what's going on there? Who's doing that? Of course, the same governor is saying that these are the Ukrainian forces who are trying to attack on Russian territory, clearly to smear Ukrainian army, which had declared before that we're not doing operations anywhere on Russian territory. Our main or the only territory that we fight for or we free is Ukraine. Of course, the motivation for blaming Ukrainians is very enticing, because you can say, well, this is outside force, because admitting the reality is that this is battalions from within Russia is a much more scary truth, which means politically that Putin does not really control what's going on in his country. There are military opposition, armed opposition to him that is ready to take action. In fact, two Russian groups. One is called RDK, which is an abbreviation for Русский Добровольческий Корпус, so Russian Volunteer Corps, and another group called Liga Legion Svoboda России, which is the Legion for Freedom of Russia, have taken responsibility. They're saying this is us. This is us taking action. So these are Russian citizens who have taken up arms against Putin. Whether this has been coordinated with Ukrainian forces, we don't know, but I would say most likely yes, because in all evidence is that they have come through the territory of Ukraine to make these attacks. But so far, no civilians have been killed. There have been a few who were injured, but it's not clear who injured them, because as these two battalions were advancing, the Russian FSB, which is really KGB, have been scrambled to oppose them. There was shootouts, and so you can see that they have a similar tactic, a similar approach to fighting as Ukrainians, trying to spare all civilians. So this is not Ukrainians, this is Russian citizens fighting against Putin's regime, which is a huge signal, of course, to the rest of the world that it's not like a rigid vertical as far as the Russian military. And the conversations are, is anybody from Russian military going to switch sides and actually fight on the side of armed opposition? What else we know? We know that so far they have been able to shoot down one of the helicopters of the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation. So it looks like they're well armed and well trained. In fact, that we know that the second group, the Legion for the Freedom of Russia, they have a training base and they have an active part of their group, but also they're training all kinds of new disciplines within their ranks. But these are not villagers who took up, arms they found elsewhere in their cellars or anything. These are professional groups who are fighting Putin's regime from the inside. And of course, this does help the Ukrainian army to untie some of the forces in Donbass to be thrown to Belgorod to protect that, which does help free. But this is not an initiative of Ukraine. This is not something that Ukrainians are doing. So if Tucker Carlson tells you that this is, see, I told you, Ukrainians are attacking Russia, no way. This is not them. Okay, number two, what's happening in Bakhmut? So you remember that since early October, Russians have concentrated their forces mainly on one small town in Ukraine called Bakhmut. It's about 70,000 people who used to live there before the attack began. And for, what is it, 8 months, they've been trying to take over that town. This was not the regular Russian army, but the paramilitary group called Wagner with their chief is Prigozhin. So yesterday or the day before, he made this video of proclaiming that they have taken the territory of Bakhmut, and he's the video he's taking is he has taken is not in the part that was still under Ukrainian control, but it was around the railway station, presumably because it's still dangerous to be in the newly occupied territory. So he says that from this day on, this is a Russian town. On the other side, the Ukrainian command is saying that Bakhmut is not yet taken over by the Russian forces, and even though those might seem like opposing or countering views, they're actually pretty similar, because the consensus is if Russian forces has not taken it 100%, maybe it's 95, maybe it's 98. So we're expecting that and that it will be taken over at some point. We're also, because the last, I think, 2-3 months, Russians have been making very slow progress, meters a day, to taking over the town. So. Even though this sounds like bad news, it's really not, because of several factors. Number one is that Ukraine has used Bakhmut as to trade the territory for grinding down the Russian army, which means that as they were taking this territory, they were taking heavy losses. I think even President Biden mentioned this the other day. He said that in Bakhmut alone, Russian forces had lost 100,000 combatants, and it doesn't mean that 100,000 were killed, but what it does mean is that 100,000 were killed or injured. They are out of the war. In any case, they're not combatants anymore. So Ukraine has been used this as a tactic, as in preparation. So in fact, one of the commentators or advisors from the military command, he says that when Ukrainian offensive begins and we're able to take Crimea, or we'll be able to take the rest of Donbass, it will be 70% because of the people who were holding down Bakhmut. Because as Ukrainians were tying down the Russian forces in Bakhmut, it helped us prepare for this major counteroffensive. It had detracted Russians from attacking on other fronts, and it had deteriorated their army. So it does help Ukraine. Another reason this is not such bad news is because that's not how military people think, like taking town by town. They think more in regions or directions that they take. Particularly for Bakhmut, this is a clear situation, because Bakhmut lies sort of on the lower plain, and around it on the heights there's Ukrainian artillery. So even though they had taken this low ground, it doesn't give them any technical advantage. In fact, when you listen to the video that Prigozhin, the chief of Wagner, is making, he says, well, now we've taken Bakhmut, we're gonna do some fortification here, and by May 25th, we're gonna leave town and we're gonna transfer our duties to the regular Russian army. In other words, they understand that they cannot hold this. This is a very bad position to be in, that they will not be able to hold this. So we've taken it. We've gathered all the accolades. As Prigozhin, I've raised my profile within Moscow, and now we're gonna go away because there is no way we're gonna be able to hold on to Bakhmut. So they're running, presumably because when Russian army takes over, they will be the ones to blame for losing Bakhmut again. In fact, we know that this is the case because in the last 2 weeks, Ukrainian army has been able to push back the upper pincer of Russian flank further and further. So even though Bakhmut itself is either all the way taken or partly taken, Ukrainian forces are surrounding the city. So taking it back will not be a huge deal. So my friend John, by the way, he told me this, that the tactic that Russia uses is called pincers. It's not. I was calling it claws before, but it's not correct. But even you can see that this tactic of Russian army has been existing since probably they had become an army, where they would try to outflank from one side and another, and then try to close and surround the opposing army. In fact, when you read The War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, that's the tactic he's describing when the Russian army was fighting Napoleon. So some things never change. So Ukrainian army has been able to push back the upper pincer that you see sort of hanging over Bakhmut. So operationally, I think this is a victory for Russian, or eventual victory for Russian, but it's not for a long time. They're not going to be able to hold on to it. And operationally, tactically, Ukraine had won this battle because so much of Russian combatants have been removed from the battlefield in Bakhmut. Okay, so that's what's going on there. Oh, and one more interesting fact about that is that today, after the announcement that the Bakhmut has been taken, there is videos of Ukrainians taking prisoners of war from Russian army in Bakhmut. So this tells you that it's not a complete surrender. It's not really a victory. It's sort of, they've tactically are placed in there, but it doesn't mean they control the situation in or around Bakhmut. So F-16s. This is an interesting question because you remember before F-16s, the big topic for the supply of Ukraine was tanks, and that finally happened. What was it? January, when both the major countries in the EU and the United States have agreed to Ukrainian requests for tanks, and so America is sending Abram tanks, but they have to be reconfigured a little bit. And then the Germans are sending their Leopard tanks. And after that, Ukraine has been saying we need aviation, we need jets. So the campaign for F-16 started, and the conversation was that, does Ukraine really need this for now? And the consensus on the Western world was that it's not really needed because you can win the war with the machinery, the artillery, and the training and the tanks that have been supplied to date. So with this new authorization for F-16s, as you remember, President Biden had said that we do not have any objection to other countries in the EU transferring their F-16s to Ukraine. It's not to be useful in the upcoming offensive of Ukraine. It's to establish a defense framework for the future. Even though there have been the dates of these supplies have not been named, but we know just by the time it takes to train F-16 pilots that if this was authorized a few days ago or a week ago, then the pilots will be ready about end of September. So that's when we're expecting this. So these jets are not going to be used for the immediate offensive of Ukraine, but it will be used in the future to secure the perimeter. In fact, General Budanov, who is the reconnaissance chief for Ukraine, he says that to establish secure borders in Ukraine, we're going to have a 100-kilometer demilitarized zone between Ukraine and Russia in the future in order to keep our borders secure. So there's going to be enough work for these jets, for these fighters in the future. Okay. Yeah. So we can say that this is for the years to come, and the intention of Ukraine is not only to win the war as soon as possible, but also for the future to establish a framework that will allow us to live in peace for the foreseeable future. And as we've seen from G7 announcements, or what different leaders have expressed with G7 that happened in Japan, that the intention is to help Ukraine to establish such a system for the years ahead, not only to solve the problem that we have in front of us right now. Finally, the preparations for Ukrainian offensive. I stopped calling it counteroffensive because it's not really countering anything. It's just moving forward. So we're going to call it the Ukrainian massive offensive. It's taking longer than anybody had predicted. So you remember that about a month ago, everybody was saying, well, it will be like mid-May. Early May, and then Zelensky went on. I think he was interviewed by somebody from BBC, and he said, "Well, we're taking our time because we need to make sure that everything has been supplied and we're ready, and then we will go because we want to save as much personnel as we can." Although before the only two parameters were the weather, because we wanted the ground to be dry, and the supply of all the machinery, which by the latest I have seen is 98% there. Okay, so now we're seeing that counteroffensive is it's not going to be like D-Day, which is a image that sort of comes up to mind when you think about it. It's more of it will have more of like a spot effect. It will happen something here, something there. When you think to September last year, when Kharkiv was freed, large territory, and then Kherson in the south, it was a big, it was a trick move, right? Because everybody thought Ukrainian army is going to go to Kherson first of all, and then surprise, they started moving really fast in the northern region because they have been able to find weak spots in the Russian defense in the north, and then eventually they had surrounded Kherson enough that the Russian army left by themselves. So it's really tactical genius that I think we're going to see in this new offensive as well. We're already starting to see, even though this does not make it the regular news cycle that much anymore, that Ukrainian army is destroying the fuel centers around its border, even on the Russian territory. By using the missiles that have been given to us by Britain, called Storm Shadow, we're able to reach a lot longer. So it's about 150 kilometers, which in miles is what? About 100 miles, 90 to 100 miles. We're able to destroy the fuel and the supply centers on the Russian side, which is a clear indication of an upcoming offensive. Because what you want to do is disrupt the supply chains and the refueling of the enemy, and then move in. That way you can disable their machinery as much as you can, and them from advancing, them from being able to protect what they already have, and then you can move in more easily, because as you know, the one who advances always takes bigger losses than the one who is standing their ground. So that's why they're trying to de-risk as much as they can their Ukrainian advance in the near future. But all the signs are there that the preparation for the offensive is in full swing, and we're going to be able to see, most likely beginning of summer, see more freed territories by Ukrainian forces. Ideally, this would be the entire territory of Ukraine as of 1991 borders, which will include the entirety of Donbass, which is of eastern Ukraine, and Crimea. And then the question will be, what do you do further? How do you get Putin to capitulate, or is this going to be an Israel-Palestine situation or a North-South Korea situation? There's still war in both of those places, but they sort of have to live with it, and that is another huge big question. I don't know. Hopefully, what I'm hoping will happen is when our territory is freed, we're able to secure the borders, that the effectiveness of Russian attacks on Ukraine will be nigh, and then using diplomatic methods, some sort of a peace treaty or capitulation will be signed by Russia. That would be ideal. But what I know for sure is that Ukrainian army is not going to try and go into Russian territory and take new territories. That is not feasible. We're going to lose all of our Western support. I mean, that's just stupid. That's not going to happen. So that's it. That's what's going on. Sort of a tense moment until we have everything lined up, all the ducks and the Bradleys and the M777s, until we're ready to move in and free Ukrainian territory. And friends, thank you for your continued support of Ukraine. I see a lot of you post things and questions and everything that's happening. You're watching the situation as we are, and with God's help, Ukraine will be free and secure for a long, long time.